Okay, I know I'm coming on a little late with this, but I figured I'd say it because I don't know how much more cold we're gonna get during this winter, especially down south. I live in Iowa, about 15, 20, maybe 30-minute drive from the Minnesota border. Right now, our temperatures are getting, with wind chill, down to 44 below. So it's cold. But I'm staying relatively warm in my house. So, and I own my house, so I have to winterize my own house. So I might know a thing or two about wintering. My suggestion to all of you down south with pump houses, if you're hanging tarps to cover the doors of your pump houses and put heaters in them, if they have a shiny side, face the shiny side to the inside of your pump house. This will reflect any heat you got in the pump house back into the pump house to help keep it so that the warmth stays in. If you have any possibility whatsoever of getting some of that, like, I think it's like an inch thick styrofoam with one side that's silver, take and line between your studs with that, with the silver side facing inside your pump house. If possible, place mats on your cement floors of the pump houses. Some kind of mat. Those thick play mats would be great, but if you can't get them, get your indoor, outdoor rubber mats. That would be great. That would keep some of the cold radiating from your cement floor up to the room, which would help keep your room warmer. Make sure your heat source is sat on something that cannot burn. Because if it gets cold enough, that heat source will constantly run. And the bottom of it will heat up and it can burn whatever you have underneath of it. Your animal pens. If you have them in an animal pen that has a crawl space underneath, line the outside of your pens with hay so that it comes up at least an inch or two above where the crawl space is. That way the wind can't get through there. And don't line it up by stacking a stack here and a stack here. Stagger them so that the seams are staggered. That way the wind doesn't have just a direct shot in there. If you can, before you line it, put plastic around the outside of that. That'll keep even more of the wind out. If you can't get enough hay, but you have extra tin or extra wood, use some plastic around the outside of the building and then some tin around that. Or wood around that. That will keep the heat in. Keeping your crawl space just slightly warmer than the outside temperature will help to keep your inside area warmer. Again, you're going to have animals in there, so you're going to need wood for this, either plywood or even thin plastic that they can't chew on. Something cheap if you can find it. If you've got pieces of tin, use that if you have to. But again, put that styrofoam between the boards, the support beams in the studs, and then put your plastic or your tin or whatever over on top so the animals can't eat it. That will insulate your inside so that the heat from your animals or whatever heat source you have in that building will be able to stay longer and be able to warm better. That would be your best shot. Make sure any gaps in your roof or near the roof edges are sealed. Heat rises. It will go out that top area. Make sure you also insulate your ceilings. Do not underestimate the amount of heat that can escape from a building from your ceilings. A lot of heat will escape. More heat will escape from your ceilings than what would escape from the floor. Okay? So make sure you have that well insulated. If you don't, you're going to have problems with keeping that building warm enough. Don't underestimate your ceilings. If you have the ability in the building you have to take and give a little space between where your insulation is and the ceiling top is, I would suggest you do that and put your insulation on top of whatever space that is, because the crawl space above the ceiling will end up trapping warmer air than the outside has, starting to warm up the air as it comes into that ceiling crawl space and making it so that there's less, so that it's not so hard to warm the living space. Biggest problem in cold. The cold is bad enough, but the wind is what's going to be worse. If you've got the slightest breeze, a crack just that thick in one wall can make your whole room feel cold. Seal those cracks with plastic, insulation, spray foam, however you have to seal them. Seal them. The more animals you have in one space, the more heat they are going to generate. Now you want space for your animals to be able to move around, lay down, and whatnot. But you don't want so much space that there's going to be a lot of dead air. So if you've got 3 animals in one space, you don't want a 15 by 15 room. You may want more of a 10 by 10 room, depending how big the animals are. That way more of their heat goes into that room. On the doors of every building you have, you might want to hang either a tarp or a blanket, but don't just hang it like you've got your... Okay, let's use some paper and stuff. This is your door. You don't want to hang your tarp like this. What you want to do is bring it over just slightly like this and hang one tarp so that it ends up hanging over an inch or 2 over the side of the door. And then hang another tarp like this, overlapping the center. That will force the air to go here and then around and there. And air don't run like that. It don't do zigzags like that. When you're done hanging the tarp up here, you want something to weight it down here so that it stays hung down and it doesn't blow up. It doesn't blow up like this, allowing the air in. You want it weighted down along this area here. A piece of PVC pipe rolled into it to where it touches the floor, but doesn't... How can I put this? It touches the floor like this, Not like this. You don't want any gaps whatsoever. You want it to touch the floor, but you don't want it to sag while it's sitting there. You just want it to touch the floor so that it's got a good seal there, but you don't want it to sag. And you don't want it high enough that air can get through the bottom of it. Okay? So it takes a little bit of, making sure you've got it pretty good in there. If you can't get it real good, get some of that winterise stripping and put that on the outside of the door so it makes like a weather piece that the PVC pipe can butt up against when that plastic is closed. And that'll also create a seal to the underneath of the actual door. And this will create you an airspace between the door and the plastic, and that airspace will be just slightly warmer from the outside, creating a little bit easier ability to heat. That's what you want. Just like with your pump house. Straw is great and dandy. But if you can, some kind of mat on the floor would be a lot better. Because straw, loose straw, will allow air to weave through it and come up to your animal's surface. A mat will seal that for you. I know it's a pain in the butt. When you're done with the mat, you're going to have to pull it out and clean it up. But would you rather pull it out and clean it up and end up with alive animals, or would you rather have your animals die because of the cold? That's one thing you need to think about. Make sure they have plenty of water through the cold. They are going to be using a lot of energy trying to stay warm. They need the water. They also need maybe a tad bit extra food. Make sure they have that. Any water pipes you have, if you know where they're running and they are not buried 6 feet under, stick a bale of hay along those water pipes. Line that whole thing. I don't care if you've got a bale of hay running from your barn to your house down the street. I don't care. Put a bale of hay on top of that, so that the bale of hay can give you added area that would have to freeze before it gets to your pipe. Now, the way it's been the last couple of years, I would suggest this next summer, if you're living in Texas or someplace like that, spend a little extra money, go out and have all your water lines dug up, and bury them 6 feet under. That's below the frost line of places like Iowa. That's how far down we put our water lines to make sure they don't freeze. When you bring them up out of the ground, don't bring them up out of the ground on the edge of where you've got a crawl space. And treat your crawl spaces on your house the same way you treat them for your animals' buildings. You line hay on there, or you put plastic on there, or you insulate that. If you need it to be cooled off in the summertime, then put trap doors on them that are insulated trap doors that you can open during the summer. But at least you have it there during the winter to close it. When you bring the water pipe up, bring it up at least a good 2 to 3 feet away from the wall. And after you bring it up that far away from the wall, any piping that needs to run anywhere in that house, run it along the floor as close to the floorboard as you possibly can. Now, up here in Iowa, we get, it looks like a pool noodle, but it's only round enough to fit around a pipe. Now, if you can't find any of that kind of insulation, which you should be able to find it on Amazon and whatnot, any exposed pipes, put that around them. Make sure that they're covered with that pool noodle-like stuff. It's a foamy-like stuff. If you can't find that, then use a pool noodle. Cut it so that it'll fit, not real tight, but fit around the pipe. You want probably, let me see if I can find something that would be thick enough. Probably be about that much of a space between the pipe and the pool noodle. Just a slight little air space. So what you want to do is cut the pool noodle, fold it around, and take a piece of tape, duct tape, and tape it down the edge of that pool noodle so it stays closed tightly on that. And one pool noodle should be able to do a fairly good length of the pipe, at least double the length of what your pool noodle is, because the pipe really isn't that big around. And that will insulate all of your piping that's running up out of the ground into the house or whatever building you have. That'll make sure that the cold doesn't get to it. If you can find it, find what's called heat tape for water pipes. It's a thin tape about so thick, and it's long, and you just wrap it around the water pipe, kind of like taking this piece of ribbon, and that's what it'll look like, and it'll be like so thick, and say this is your water pipe. You want to wrap that heat tape around your water pipe about like that. It doesn't have to be wrapped so it's close like this. It just has to be wrapped so that it's touching the pipe all the way down. And you want it wrapped because if you just put it on one side like this, then this side is going to be getting the heat, but this side is going to be allowed to freeze a little bit. So you want to wrap it like this, so sporadically it's getting heat on all sides of the pipe. And you don't need to wrap it real tight. You can just wrap it so it goes around it. And then you can take and seal that with the pool noodle like thing. Now, if you've got a good heat tape, it's not going to get warm enough to melt that pool noodle like thing. It won't bother it one bit. That'll keep the heat inside of that pool noodle so that you know that your pipes are not going to freeze. Suggestion: after you do that, to make sure you do have good heat tape for that, and it'll also lessen the amount of the heat tape having to cycle on to keep your water pipes warm, lessening the chance of the heat tape from giving out sooner. After you're done doing that, make sure you have an area where you can check every few hours where that pool noodle is, where you can open the pool noodle up to make sure it's not melting in there, because you don't want it to melt. Okay? I did the actual pipe pool noodle stuff with some heat tape, and it didn't hurt it one darn bit. So all you need is something that'll keep it slightly warm. If you can't find heat tape, then do the pool noodle thing, but then take a small heater and blow towards your pipes. If your pipes are running this way, face your heater so it runs down your pipes like this. That way it gets some of the heat. But make sure you have your crawl space sealed off good enough so that no wind can come in under there. Wind is your enemy. I had a friend who had pipes that kept on freezing because one side of their basement was open to the outside. I had to go over there and help them put plastic up, and I doubled the plastic like I showed you so that he could still get into that basement space, but that plastic kept the wind out. And all he had was one of those little box heaters. We faced it towards the pipe, and it kept it warm enough to keep it thawed. And it was down below zero that winter. Now, if you can do that below zero in a small crawl space in the basement of a house up in Iowa, you can do that in Texas. So, make sure that you are doing these kind of things. Your windows on your house, cover them with plastic. You don't need to do the overlap with that. Just straight up cover it with a piece of plastic. It does not matter how thick that plastic is, because no matter how thick you got it, if there's cold on the other side, the plastic on this side is going to feel cold. Okay? We use really thin pieces of plastic on our window. The purpose of the plastic is simply to keep any air gaps closed. Because like I said, the slightest air gap will keep cold. If you do not have storm windows on your house, then not only put a piece of plastic on the inside of your house, but put a piece of plastic on the outside of the window. That way you're double gapped. You've got your outside gap that will get cold over here, and your inside gap on the other side of the window that will stay more or less warm over here, making it so there's less that you have to use to heat your house. And let's just hope your house is well insulated for summer cooling months. If it's not, go out and buy yourself a large piece of plastic and wrap your house as if it's a gift, because it will keep the cold out. And then just cut yourself your opening where your door is, and then when you do that, use slats to hold down the plastic. If all you do is staple it down, you're going to have the wind pulling it up and ripping it, and it's not going to do you any good. What you want to do is you got your piece of plastic here. When you're putting it onto the building, this is a slat. You want to put your slat or a piece of cardboard or whatever, and then nail into the slat or the piece of cardboard. Slat is the best. But if all you've got is a nice thick piece of cardboard, cardboard will work. Make sure it's about that thick. I'd say that's about 1.5 inches to 2 inches thick. That way it has a large surface that it has to pull off. And you got to remember, if you're using cardboard, it gets wet, it's going to get soggy. So you might want to take, and when you put the plastic on the piece of cardboard like this, fold the plastic over the top of the cardboard and then nail it down. But make sure when you fold it like this, you keep it tight. And you keep the nails close enough that the wind can't pull up underneath of it like this. Okay? If you can, don't just wrap it once like that. wrap it twice like that. That way it leaves less room for that to pull up, and it keeps your piece of cardboard sealed. Always overlap your plastic by at least an inch or two. That'll keep it so that the air can't get between the two pieces of plastic. Always overlap. So I hope this helps some of you southern people who have never lived up north and never had to deal with winter weather. Most important, making sure your ceilings are well insulated. Making sure all air gaps are closed. I don't care if it's a pinhole. Make sure that is stuffed closed. Grocery bags, old plastic grocery bags, when you feel the air coming through a crack, if you can stuff some grocery bag in there, will work great. That will do you a lot of good. Get those little round child-proofing plug things for your outlets. That will help to keep a lot of cold air from coming into your house. Mainly, you need those mainly on any outlets that are on exterior walls. Because there is a space between where that outlet is and the outside wall that cold can get into the outlet box and then into your house, and you're going to be dealing with the cold. So get those little round outlet plugs if you can. That will help you a lot. Make sure that every one of your outlets have an outlet cover on it on your exterior wall, or else you're going to be allowing cold air to come in to your building. Those little things matter a lot. The same with exterior wall light switches. Make sure you have a cover on them, because if you don't, you're going to have some cold coming into your house. If possible, take that cover off and tape a piece of plastic around the area where that switch is and butt it up right next to where the switch itself is and tape that, and then put your cover back in. You won't be able to see the piece of plastic taped up back there. And not only will that help you during winters, these freak winters we're having, it'll help you also during the summer so that your cold air doesn't escape outside from those areas, lowering your cooling cost during the summer months. So I hope this helps you all. I know the cold is coming now, and I know you're not going to want to go outside. I mean, heck, I went out to shovel off my walk and just about frostbit my fingers just shoveling off the top step for about 2 minutes. I know, it's not nice. But if you want to keep your animals and yourself warm, you're going to have to do this in those southern states. If you want to keep your water running, you are going to have to do this in these southern states. Because we are now having 2 years in a row that you guys are having this extra cold weather. This means that it is going to become something that may not happen every year, but maybe every few years. You want to be prepared before it happens instead of waiting until after it happens. So everything I've suggested to you now, next summer, if you make it through this winter, next summer, my suggestion is, if you can, start preparing now. For those of you down there with horse stalls that have the bars on it, start preparing to put up some kind of a thing you can hang down and seal shut. And then during the summer you can hang up and have it braced up. That makes an area to shade the stall from the sun and the rain. That would be a double benefit, you know. So like you've got your horse stall here, these are where your bars is. Find something you can hang down like this, and then it'll hang down on this side, and you'll have something that'll be like a weather strip between the two to keep the wind out, and then a weather strip along the bottom here and along the edge here to keep the wind out, and then it'll attach down. Then during the summer you can have it so it lifts up, and with an angle pole like so, let me get down there, like so, it'll hold that up during the summer, and you can use a flagpole holder for that, and it'll hold that up during the summer, causing a shade where these bars are so that stall stays cooler. Just as simple as that. So I hope all of this helps you guys. You guys might think I'm nuts for it, but if you want to prepare for winter, don't ask somebody down in the south how to prepare for winter. Don't ask somebody who just moved from the south to the north how to prepare for winter. Ask the people who have been living in the north for more than 10 years and have lived a few of these really cold seasons. That's who you want to ask, how do you prepare for winter where you are? Because they're the ones that's gonna know.